Have you. If we've not met, I am Audrey. I'm the president of FilExcellence, and this is a very special kickoff of Kapwa Hours, which is a new FilExcellence space that we are creating for our community, by our community, a safe space that we where we come together. Ideally, we've thought about, knowledge sharing, skill sharing, wisdom sharing, just passion sharing, a place where we all come together to share all the things that we love and all the things that we want to talk about, and share just more of ourselves as a community. And this is a very special kickoff. We have the one and only Lisa Reid with us, in conversation with our own Matt Veland, on her background and where she is now and how she's built the company that she's built. And we're so excited to have her. And I'll let Matt do all the intros for you. Yeah, we're excited to have you. Thanks for being here.
Hi, everyone. I think I know most of you, but for those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Veland. I have the privilege of serving as the treasurer for FilExcellence currently. Been there since the beginning in late 2020 during the pandemic. By day, I work as a financial planner here in the Washington, D.C. area. I mainly work with business owners as they exit their business, as well as some federal government employees. So it has been a tough 4 to 8 weeks here. But enough about me. I want to make sure that we spend enough time introducing our speaker. Just a quick introduction here for what Kapwa Hours are supposed to be. Capwa as a concept, I'm sure a lot of you have heard it or have seen it on social media. It represents the core value, Filipino value of shared identity and interconnectedness, the recognition that the self is not separate from us and from others, but fundamentally connected to our community. It's both a concept that we see emerge from Psikologiyang Filipino as pioneered by Virgilio Enriquez in the Philippines and some others. It's also an ethos. I think it's the driving force behind what Filipinos conceive of and what we're known for as far as hospitality, collective responsibility, and the deep sense that your success is my success, your struggle is my struggle. I think this concept of shared humanity often becomes the invisible thread that connects Filipinos across the diaspora to their heritage and guides their approach to leadership, business, and community building. As for our first Kapwa Hour speaker, Lisa Angulo Reid is the co-founder and CEO of Dear Flor, the first Filipino-owned cannabis company that makes gummies that are 100% vegan with 100% Filipino flavors, like ube calamansi and buko pandan. Founded by Lisa and her husband Brian, who I had the privilege of meeting just a few weeks ago, Dear Flor is bringing Filipino culture to the world one flavor at a time. Lisa's journey into entrepreneurship began after a successful 20-plus year career in advertising and marketing, where she led transformative campaigns for some of the world's most loved and trusted consumer packaged goods brands. Beyond her professional success, Lisa is dedicated to increasing Asian representation and visibility. She has built and led employee resource groups, or ERGs, as I'm sure most of you are familiar with, for Asian identifying colleagues at 2 companies. As a founding member of Chief, the exclusive network for executive women, Lisa spearheaded landmark events that amplify the voices of Asian women leaders, including Chief's first AAPI Heritage Month celebration in New York City and its inaugural Philippine American History Month celebration with featured Filipino trailblazers Loida Nicholas Lewis and Nicole Ponseca. Lisa lives in Greenwich Village, New York, with her husband Brian, their 2 children, and their beloved Pomsky. Lisa brings a unique perspective to entrepreneurship, having navigated the corporate world for over 2 decades before stepping into her role as a startup founder. Her journey represents the growing movement of Filipino Americans who are not just participating in American business culture, but actively reshaping it by bringing their cultural values and perspectives to the forefront. So before we dive into the questions, Lisa, thank you for joining us. How are you doing tonight?
Hey everyone, I guess I'm doing fine. Excited to be here. I'm amazed to be a Phil Excellence mentor to Crystal Brown from Barclay Coffee. So shout out to Crystal. I don't think she's here today, but it's all good. It's all good, but doing well.
Great. So glad to have you, Lisa. So let's start with your origin story, right? If you're a
Sure.
superhero. I know that in preparing for this, we talked about the fact that you grew up in West Virginia, which people don't normally think of as Filipino American country, right? What was it like growing up in a part of the country that isn't traditionally thought of as containing many Filipinos?
It was interesting because it's not a very big state, right? In fact, it's usually ranks in the top 3, poorest states in the country. But where it is number one, Filipinos are the largest Asian American community in the state, and so it's interesting. When you grow up in West Virginia as a Filipino, it's at least when I was growing up, it was fairly synonymous with being a doctor's kid. A
Yeah.
lot of the folks, like my parents, came to replenish the medical community in the state, and so um, We had Filipino parties all the time. I always had other Filipino kids in my classes. I've met folks that grew up in places that were a little more, let's say, cosmopolitan than, lovely Moundsville, West Virginia. But a lot of those folks never went to school with another Filipino until they got to college. I mean, from the time I was in first grade all the way through high school, there were at least two other Filipinos in my class, which is wild to even contemplate. And, when you grow up in a place like West Virginia, it's interesting. Something that I will tell people and it kind of makes their heads explode. Um, West Virginia might be the least racist place I ever lived in because you have to remember, I know, I'm looking at your face.
Please
So
explain.
there's a fine line, and I wish I could see all your faces right now because I love telling this to people because I usually get the like, what the fuck are you talking about, lady? Um, there's there's a difference between ignorance and bigotry, right? Ignorance is easily remedied by getting to know somebody who is different from you, learning more about that individual's culture, and you can chip away at somebody's ignorance bit by bit, right? Just through simple interactions. Bigotry doesn't work the same way, right? They don't want to get to know me. They don't want to really get to know people who are different from them. And so you encounter a lot of ignorance, and that comes in places where there are high rates of poverty, right? But they're not bad people. They just have not met someone like you before. And you take the fact that most of the people in our community were working in the medical field. So we are serving and caring for a community that might not have known you, but they get to know you pretty damn quick, right? And at the end of the day, you're in the ER, you need emergency surgery. The doctor that shows up isn't a white guy. Like, what are you going to do? Wait for one to show up? I think you want that surgery. You probably want to live, right? You want
Yeah.
the help. It's a quick way to get over. I mean, it's not perfect. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but because you have the opportunity to chip away at the ignorance, my dad's patients freaking loved him. Um, they would bring him vegetables during the summertime. Um, Total West Virginia fashion. Somebody brought my dad a canned squirrel, and if you don't know what that is, it
No.
is. It is. So, you can hunt anything you want there. And so some people hunt squirrels, other people hunt venison or deer. Um, yep, somebody brought my dad a canned squirrel, and what that is a squirrel that has been pressure cooked and canned. So put in a mason jar, kind of like, when you're making jam or preserves, you put it in a mason jar, vacuum seal it. Yeah, and so he showed up with a jar of canned squirrel for my father, and my father was just like, he was really sweet about it. He thought it was kind of like amusing. He brought it home to my mother. Her response was like, "This is not coming in the house. I did not leave the Philippines to eat a canned squirrel." So, needless to say, we never ate the squirrel. So that was just a little bit of what growing up in West Virginia is like. A little
Right.
weird, a little wonderful.
I was wondering, like, is she gonna say, hey, it can't come in the house, or is it just gonna be like, hey, let's serve it with rice, right?
Yeah,
What,
absolutely not. My mom was just like, "No way, not happening."
got it.
No.
You know, it's a really interesting perspective that I don't know. There's probably a lot of truth to it, but also the perspective that you have about kind of finding what you felt was great about it or unique about it, right? So that's kind of the background that you grew up in. Inevitably, you transition into corporate America. How did that come about?
So, I mean, obviously I didn't leap from West Virginia straight to corporate America, right? I did a pit stop in Boston for college. That's where I ended up meeting my husband Brian, and then from there on to New York. And it's interesting. Like this is the late '90s. I had internships in college. I had some really good internships in college. I tell you this is totally going to date me, but whatever. Back in the day, I think most of you, AOL and dial-up and modems totally predates most of the people on this call. But it was hilarious in the early days in the internet, right? It was very different because you had moved from dial up like walled gardens, if you will, with like shitty bulletin boards and really not much information, to spaces where like Microsoft was getting into the game and the internet was just starting to kind of open itself up. And they wanted to connect to communities. So AOL was just like, oh, we can compete with Microsoft. They have their like cities. We're coming up. We're going to do these like digital cities in all these places. And so I was like intern number two at one of
Mm,
those. And then the other internship that I did was with the Attorney General's office in the state of Massachusetts. It's two totally different internships. But when it came time to actually get a job, I wanted to do one of two things. It was going to be either publishing or advertising. Problem was, in the late 90s, you couldn't get a job in either place unless you'd had an internship in
mm,
college. And
mm,
so I don't know, it didn't let it stop me. So to get into my advertising job, you had to start out as a secretary, as an admin. So that's what I did.
mm,
So
mm,
my 9 to 5 was answer phones, find people, get yelled at, schedule somebody's, travel arrangements, schedule meetings. But then after 5 o'clock, so somebody had the wherewithal to make me an admin on a new business team. And if you know anything about what it is to do new business inside of an agency, it is crazy. It's very fast paced. Your role is to pitch, bring clients in. Um, but if you work on these teams, you get access to the best thinkers inside of the agency, the best creatives, right? You learn how to build teams. You learn how to build pitch decks that go into these things. You learn how to actually create the room when you're doing these like big meetings. So there's a little bit of like stage theater and production, pitching and strategy. So I guess the pitching piece is the sales piece. The strategy is the like, what is the creative idea that we want to bring to the table? And then you actually get to see the creative made. So honestly, I still hold up that first year working as an admin as one of my top three work
mm,
experiences ever. I didn't sleep
mm.
at all. But like
Right.
you're 22, like whatever. Even if you had finished work at 2 o'clock, you were still going out anyway. So what difference did it make, right?
I remember
Um,
22. Yeah.
what?
I remember 22. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I learned so much during that time. And so that's how got my start in corporate America. There was no other Filipinos there. I think maybe there was one, maybe. I don't think I was ever sure. I couldn't tell if she was Vietnamese or Filipino. Like just true story. Like,
You think everyone's Filipino?
but yeah, I just, maybe, but maybe not. Yeah, but I was definitely the only Filipino working in account services or client services in my agency in New York at that point in time. I think there were maybe only two other women that I've met who started in advertising that were Filipino around the same time as me. One of them was Nicole Fonseca. She
Mm.
started at Saatchi, I started at Y&R.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I didn't realize that connection. I know this is like a little bit of a detour, but you mentioned really kind of, pushing in the early days. And I feel like these days there's a lot of conversation. And one of the things that I'm trying to balance in my career and in the career of others is, how much of it is we want to pay interns and we want to treat people right, even as you're starting.
Yeah.
And then, there's also this competing directive to like put in your dues and eat shit, right? It's probably finding a balance in how you approach that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
It's interesting. I always believe you should pay your interns. Like
Mm,
they're putting in real work. And at the end of the day, like it's not like they're being paid a ton of money either, right? So yes, get the experience, but part of the experience is learning how to get paid for the experience that you're getting or for the work that you're delivering. Um, and so yeah, I agree with you. There was a point in time where it was the like eat it, take it for the learning. That's not right either, because again, especially for people who are children of immigrants, whose parents didn't really have a roadmap for how to navigate corporate America, right? I think when we were talking yesterday, just to kind of, get ready for this, I said like a lot of this stuff, we were the first to do it and we were doing it without a safety net. There was no freaking way my parents were going to teach me how to like negotiate for a raise or, have a convo with my boss because I think, the person next to me, sucks, right? And is unproductive. Like they don't teach you how to fire people. Like that
right.
sucks, but it's a skill that you end up having to learn if you're in this long enough. Where was I going with that? I guess what I was trying to say is if I'm so happy that the mentality isn't the eat shit and take it anymore.
Mm,
Um, Especially for folks like us. Because again, part of learning how to navigate corporate America is learning how to get paid in corporate
mm,
America. Because
mm.
last I heard, none of us was working for free.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. Not the civilization we're living in for sure.
Yeah.
But thanks for that digression here. So I want to make sure that we kind of really get into your
Yeah.
current and what I would say maybe one of your more exciting acts, right? So we are able to transition through Boston, then New York. We're able to get into a couple great roles where we work on some great campaigns. We work our way up, and then we get ready for what eventually becomes Dear Flor.
Yeah.
But right before we get there, how do you feel like that marketing and corporate background prepared you for entrepreneurship in different ways?
Oh gosh. I think when it comes to like choosing the path of entrepreneurship or just, when you choose the path of being a founder, it's something that I believe is intrinsically in you because this is a tough road, right? There's two paths. And they're both completely valid paths, right? One is the path of staying in corporate America, rise, 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 keep going until you decide it's not something you want to do anymore, or you have it in you to, do something. You may not know what it is, but it's in you. You have ideas, and you're probably, if you're in that second camp, you're always kind of sharing your ideas with folks, and eventually one, you know, speaks to you, and you're like, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna go do this. Um, I think definitely my marketing and advertising background prepared me because one, you learn resiliency when you work in corporate America. I guess it's less of a marketing thing. It's more of a corporate, like, corporate thing. I think I guess let's start with the macro. You learn the resiliency piece. Um, you learn how to be told no, even when you know it should be a yes. You learn how to say no to things, even
Mm,
though they want you to say yes,
mm,
right? Like the hard no, being able to deliver the hard no is a skill. Like it takes
right.
time to learn how to say no to people, especially if you're Filipino, because we've
Mm,
all been trained to say yes to so many different things,
yeah.
right? From a marketing standpoint, like obviously, if you're in that business, you're trained from day one to learn about strategy, you're to learn the whole management of the business, to learn like what a great idea looks like. And so all of those things are really important factors that came to play as we were thinking about, Dear Flor, even before we knew what Dear Flor was.
Yeah.
So
So then you had one of those ideas. It ended up being Dear Flor. What do you feel like really pushed you over? To say, hey, this is the one that we want to move forward. We want to throw the dice on.
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like I could have kept going in the agency world forever or staying, I could have kept working for other companies, but here's the reality. At this moment in time, you will reach the point where you don't have a machete that's sharp enough to cut through the bamboo ceiling. That is just facts. Okay? You see it in leadership. There still aren't many Filipinos leading big businesses. I did a talk at the consulate back in January. It was all about, Filipinos in the New York area that work in advertising and marketing. And it was a privilege to have Vince Lim there. If you all don't know Vince Lim, he is probably the senior most creative executive in a major holding company agency today. He was responsible for Fearless Girl. If you saw the State Street Bank of the, girl kind of facing off against the bull, he's done a lot of other cool shit too. But outside of him, there aren't many of us. I mean, it's growing in number, but it's not a lot. So again, what that means is you will hit a point where you can call it a plateau. You can call it a point where the ceiling is no longer, you know, permeable. So you have to decide what you want to do. You can kind of keep going with it. It's
Mm,
Vince Lim, Lim. You can keep going with it and just like be content with the steady. Because don't get me wrong, like the money is decent up there. It just depends on how far you want to take it and if you're ready to, you know, um, stagnate's cruel. I don't want to say stagnate. I think you can be happy there. You can be comfortable. You'll be well paid. You'll have
mm.
insurance, and that's fine. But for me, there were just other things that I wanted to do, and I'm not good with complacency. I guess we'll just put it that way.
For some of us, treading water is the same as drowning, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know you talked about this a little bit, but were there other fears that you had that you felt like you had to overcome when you took the leap? Because I think a lot of people, maybe they feel like they have an idea, maybe not in this audience, but maybe somewhere, someplace, someone's thinking about taking a leap like that. And what kind of fears did you feel like you had to overcome to make that leap?
I mean, look, I think the single biggest fear was like, it wasn't even really a fear. It's like sticker shock. It's the realization that you have to do things like pay for your own insurance. Like that, I think was the suckiest, like re slap of reality that I got there. And I think here's why. Like the leap to starting Dear Flor wasn't such a big smack in the face, was because my husband and I had started the company when I was still in between roles. So after agency, I went to go lead brand at a tech company based out in the Bay. Before I started that job, we had, decided, hey, you know what? We want to start this company. Let's just get this started. And as you do, right, you're still in ideation phase. There is no company yet. You don't have a product yet. These are things that you do on your own time because it makes you happy. It's energizing. Like if you go into your current job thinking you're going to learn everything that you want from it, like, sorry, it's not going to happen, right? If you're like me and there are other things that you want to like stretch into or lean into, like that's something that I've just always done naturally. And this was the thing that I did on my other hours. Like once work was done, let's start working on, product concepts. What do we want to call this company? What flavors do we want to explore? What should it have? What shouldn't it have? And we did that for about 8 months. We had a brand, we had ideas of products. And I think, if that's January, by October, we were looking for manufacturers and formulators to get us started on the actual product development piece of it, right?
Mhm.
Brand name
Mhm.
done, concepts, let's now try making a product. And that was 8 months. And all the while, we're in R&D. I'm still working my other job and doing this because this one is just giving me way more life than my other role is. Other job paid the bills, insurance, but you know, passion was certainly there. I've also always been somebody who believes that, if you want to do something, there's always time for the things that you want to do. The question is, what are you deselecting to make time for those things? And so you chip away. You get much better at delegating the shit tasks, on the other side, so that you can think about, how to make a better product. So for me, like taking the leap wasn't scary because when it was time to go, um, I had something that I was walking into and it was mine, right? I think a lot of people believe that, building your own thing, founding a company, you just quit your job and you like go do it. Like, don't do that. That's crazy, right? Give yourself the time and space. Your thing didn't exist 2 months ago. If it doesn't exist 2 months from now, nobody's going to know except for you. So figure out how to make it work. Give yourself the time and space to really think it through correctly so that when it's time for you to make the leap, you can do it with your head clear and you're not making this choice out of fear or desperation, right? And I think you have total control to do that for yourself.
I've heard a lot of founders talk about that transition just in different spaces, different events. But I think what you just said was one of the more calming, reassuring ways that that someone has been able to have that conversation. So I appreciate you just kind of walking through it and just saying, "Hey, this is when we felt like we were ready," and it was kind of an easy transition. And I loved what you said about walking into something that was yours. I think those of us that are in entrepreneurship and running our own business to a degree, that's something we can all empathize with, right? So we've arrived at Dear Flor. We've arrived at the company now that you've built and you're currently building. As far as growing into a functioning company, where would you say you all are on your journey right now?
Oh wow. Where are we on the journey? This is a roller coaster ride. It's a fun one. It's crazy. I mean, like, look, in many ways, like we've been around for 2 years, but it still feels like early days. Like, and here's why. If you know anything about the cannabis industry, it is a tale of two countries. You have the licensed state programs. So think California, think New York, New Jersey. It's what people think about when they think about a U.S. cannabis program. It tends to be state run. The other side of it is the side that is federally legal, and that is the hemp D9 market, right?
Mhm.
Which is totally legal under the Farm Bill, right? And when we launched Dear Flor, we actually launched in California. We were part of the state license program. Um, it was kind of amazing because for a little Filipino brand making gummies, we ended up launching in three stores to start. One was in Abbot Kinney, another one was in Beverly Hills, and then the third one was in Cow Hollow up in San
Mhm.
Francisco. These are three very non-Filipino, non-Asian neighborhoods, right? When you look at the demographic profile of people in these hoods, Abbot Kinney gets a lot of tourists like foot traffic, as does Beverly Hills. Average age of your buyer in Beverly Hills was maybe a little bit older, high sleep buyer, affluent. Cow Hollow, younger, white, probably works in tech, high disposable income. So again, not very Asian, very few Asian brands to be found. And so we did that. They quickly expanded us to five and then to seven stores. In about 4 or 5 weeks, we were top three brand on shelf there. Um, had an amazing run, but you know, as with a lot of things in California cannabis, there was an issue of non-payment in that market. And this applies all the way across the supply chain. So the way to think about it is if the dispensary isn't paying the distributor who brings the product to market, right? That means brands aren't getting paid. If brands aren't getting paid, that means the manufacturer is not getting paid. If the manufacturer is not getting paid, that means the cultivator, whoever, not getting paid. So it's just a bad chain of events and it's snowballed there. So we gave it a go. We were in seven stores. We were doing fantastically. Consumers loved our product, but nobody was paying anyone. And so we ended up making the decision midway last year to exit California. We left money on the table on California, which was unfortunate, but we made the decision to move into Hempty 9 and go completely to online sales because we said, you know what, fuck it. If they're not going to, if, why would we fight our way in a state market system that doesn't enable small, minority owned, women owned brands to thrive, right? It is impossible if you're an independent brand to thrive in California. Good luck.
Mhm.
Um, so we figured we'd have a better chance working in a system that is completely direct to consumer, where there are no middlemen. We have control over, the entire supply chain, without any, outside interference. And so that's why when you say, what stage are you at? Well, we've only been doing D2C since October, so newish, newish.
Right, right. And I'm sure we might have some real tactical questions about ordering online stuff like that, legality. But I want to save that to the end. You
Sure.
talk about the pivot that you recently made. From last year directly to consumer. I want to pivot this conversation just a little bit. I feel like we've been on a journey to see how your origin has led you all the way here to where you are with your floor. What I'd like to spend a little bit of time focusing on now is talking about maybe the role that your Filipino identity has played or not
Mhm.
played along the way. So the first thing that I wanted to ask is, was there a specific moment or experience that you had where you realized that your Filipino heritage was an asset and not something to downplay? And that could be at Dear Flor even earlier in your career.
Yeah, no, I mean, so it's interesting. Most of the clients that I worked on were consumer packaged goods companies. So I spent a lot of time working specifically on Colgate Palmolive, and
Mhm.
areas of oversight. Did oral care in Latin America, did personal care in Latin America, spent a lot of time working on Asia Pacific. And when it came to the Philippines, one of my areas of oversight was working with the teams that were doing work for Colgate toothpaste and Palmolive shampoo and soap. So for those of you that don't know, I mean, if you've been to the Philippines, you've probably seen it, but Palmolive is not just a dish liquid, it is a soap and shampoo brand in the Philippines. And they have a lot of beautiful hair models, like swing around. Anyway, because I was the only Filipino in the room with the folks in New York, they would defer all questions about Filipinos and like, do you know such and such? Like which who should be cast for this? Like, and I'm like, look, was not born in the Philippines. I have some knowledge and insight, but it's not going to trump local, Filipino market insights. And so that was kind of funny. In a weird way, it was an asset, but I was always very clear about caveating. It's like I can only take you this far. We need to work with the local teams, if we can get some real insight. But I think Filipino-ness, I really feel like I walked into it and discovered it was a true strength during the pandemic. And it was interesting. I was tasked to help build and lead the Asian ERG at my old agency. And it was January of, what was it, 20? When was the Atlanta shooting? Was that 2021, right? It was
March of
early
2021.
2021, March of 2021. And so it was interesting because one, trying to kind of shepherd a whole group of people from across the country and create a safe space on Zoom for them to feel like they had a place. I don't know. Being Filipino became an asset because what I did was lean into some of the things that make Filipinos so great, and that is our ability to kind of just gather people and bring them together, right? Um, I think also where we shine is when we say, listen, people are sick of PowerPoint presentations and heavy talks. Can we just have like a chisme session, which is like talk and relax, get away from work, right? And so those were the kinds of things that I helped bring to the table. During the time of the Atlanta shootings, I ended up creating hour-long safe spaces so that people could drop in or not if they felt like they needed to have people to talk to, connect with, we would do that. Um, During the Lunar New Year celebration, it's interesting. And it's so funny, Matt, when we were talking about this yesterday, I actually remembered it incorrectly. So here was the correct piece of it. Since I'm Filipino, my family, well, my family, I know there are Filipinos that celebrate Lunar New Year, but my family does not, right? And so I know nothing. I know about as much as, the white people that we work with when it came to like Lunar New Year. So I got a lot of the folks in the ERG who do celebrate to come together. But we talked about the celebration, but we also used it as an opportunity to talk about, misconceptions, things that people don't understand about East Asian culture, and just start to dispel. The other thing that we did was for Women's History Month, we had a whole discussion on perception of Asian women in media, right? And I think that was really, really important conversation to have because we were an advertising agency, right? It is our job to think about how we're positioning and casting women in different roles. And so I think what was, I think, being Filipino and leaning into my Filipino-ness allowed me to show up in a way that was a little bit different than my East Asian counterparts. And it allowed me to bring ideas that were a little unexpected, and would ultimately kind of shift the way the Asian community thought about itself, right? And the
Mhm.
differences within. And it also reframed how our non-Asian colleagues thought about Asians. I hope that made sense. So,
Yeah, yeah, it does, and I really like how you force the conversation. I think a lot of times these big corporate events are like, let's order from the local Chinese restaurant and let's watch a corporate video, like let's have a speaker or something like that. So forcing those discussions, I think, is a way to have a more authentic engagement. I think that's great. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, because a recurrent FilExcellence topic since late 2020 has been this concept of not feeling Filipino enough, right? I
mhm.
mentioned yesterday, I saw Maria Ressa. She was on her book tour, and she's like, I don't feel Filipino right, Filipino enough, right? So, I mean, do you have any advice that you could give to Filipino Americans, Filipinos in the diaspora, or even Filipinos back in the Philippines that don't feel Filipino enough or feel disconnected from their cultural heritage in a professional setting?
Look, I think that's an interesting one because the feeling of being enough it's just a relative question, right? And I think it ultimately comes down to, um, who like it all comes down to how well you know yourself, right? Um, Part of that awareness perhaps is that feeling of not being Filipino enough, and like that's okay. Um, I think if you're feeling disconnected from yourself, right? I think it's again, work is only going to give you so much. If you're feeling disconnected from your culture, what are you doing outside of work for you to kind of restore that connection, right? For some people, that might be, you know, joining a Filipino community that's focused on advocacy. For others, it's joining FilExcellence, right? Because this is about finding that connection professionally, personally, Um, some folks like to learn, all the dances, all the Filipino traditional dances that they didn't get to learn as a kid, right? I think it starts there and you go forward with it. If you can bring it into work, cool. But the reality is there isn't, there may not be space for it at your office unless you're the one. And this is, and it's not about you having to do it. Like you don't have to do any of this, but like that space won't exist unless you or somebody else puts it there. Right? And so if you're not finding it work, find it outside or find ways to sneak it in. I like sneaking things in. It's fun.
Yeah. Well, we've had a lot of people answer that question. That was one of the most empowering responses I've heard. Thank you. I want to hear more of that. I appreciate it. But I want to make sure that we relate a little bit back to our discussion of Dear Flor and this discussion of identity. One of the things that I think people are always trying to talk about is what's the why? What's the vision? What are we trying to do? So with Dear Flor as a company, what do you feel like the why is for that company? What do you
Oh,
all
it's
try?
very simple. It's very simple. It boils down to one thing, like at Dear Floor and pretty much anything that Brian or I do, it all comes down to one question. What are we doing to share, Filipino culture and people with the world? And when it comes to our gummies, we're sharing Filipino culture with the world one flavor at a time, right? With 100 Ways, which is our podcast and Substack, it's about sharing, Filipino culture with the world through stories of Filipino Americans living in the diaspora. And these are all stories that we did not hear growing up. We probably heard a lot of the struggle stories, and those stories are important. We heard a lot of the stories of, our nurse counterparts, doctors, again, all really important stories. But when we think about folks who are growing up in the diaspora that have other interests that maybe don't align with those roles that we're typically known for, it's really important to find people that are, I don't want to say that they're modeling, they're just showing you that there are other ways to get shit done or to live, right? And so that's what we're doing. That's our why. And like the Miss America like answers, like we're doing it for the children. Yeah, of course. I've got two kids. I am fucking doing this for the kids. I don't want my kids to have to go through this nonsense. I don't want your kids to have to go through this nonsense. So, um, and just one other point there, when you see other groups, where they've had the time to build these, again, I'm coming back to safety nets, right? I mean, there are times when we feel like we're the first people on that tightrope and there is no net, right?
Mhm.
um, we're doing this to start creating a net so that our community has the support to do this. I believe that's what y'all are doing here with FilExcellence. You're helping to build that safety net for the community. That's the why.
Yeah, aligned. That's all I have to say. One of the things that Monica
Sure.
constantly says about what we're trying to build here at FilExcellence is we're trying to build something that she wishes she had when she was younger. So you describing what you feel like the why is feels very aligned with what we're trying to do. Love that answer. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of ties into something that you mentioned yesterday in our prep for this call, and that's about looking forward in our
Yeah.
community, really trying to not just talk about build generational wealth in terms of like have your estate right and invest, but also to invest in the community and kind of advance the material conditions of our people here. I
Yeah.
know that you said you're passionate about that. Do you have anything that you want to say there? Anything that you feel like people need to be aware of to take those steps in addition to
Yeah,
building
no, no, absolutely. I mean, I feel like if you've joined this mentorship program, you've probably taken the first step to getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
Mhm.
And here's what I mean by that. You are most likely interested in exploring just other pathways to the future, right? This is less about what profession you choose. It's just more so about your mindset, right? And so one of the things that I think a lot about now as a founder is, again, I feel like I keep coming back. The theme of safety nets keeps coming back here, right? There are other communities where, like, if you take our East Asian counterparts, the Chinese have associations. They heavily, heavily invest in their community.
Mm,
When I go to a Gold House event, and I love going to those events or the TAF events, I go there and I almost feel like, when we show up, we're a dynamic part of the community, but our ability to influence in those spaces is so low because we are not organized and we're not figuring out how to fund ourselves properly. And so my wish when I think about the future is, and I like, we are seeing the emergence of different Filipino CEOs in various spaces and places. And my hope is that when we hit big, it's not if, when we hit big, right, we're going to manifest that. We are contributing back into the community, right? And we're not retreating off into our little compounds and houses and, see y'all later, I've made my millions. We're thinking about how to actively support the next wave of founders and entrepreneurs, people who are willing to swing for the fences in service of creating generational wealth and influence for our community, right?
mm.
That is my goal. A little passionate about that. I wrote a thing on it because I just remember that day I remember reading another article and just being frustrated that we just don't have that. Like that's the one thing. But it's okay. We'll get there. We will get there.
No, no, I read it after you sent it to me. I think you have a lot, and I've started following you there. But um, that I think is one of the more unique things that we've heard. What you just described, that building, and that's something that I try to work on. We are working on here as well, not only at FilExcellence, but even in my private and personal and business life. So I am aligned with you there on that. That really moves through a lot of the questions that we had prepared as far as your origin story and really about how your identity has powered what you do at Dear Flor, what you all are doing over there, as well as really kind of how you envision the future. We want to always leave time for audience questions. So if you do have a question, you can go ahead and drop it in the chat here, and we'll just work through those questions. If not, we have a couple I think that the board has ready to ask as well. And we are not wrapping up. We have this audience Q&A, then we've got a few closing thoughts, and then we'll be looking at wrapping up. So if anyone has any questions, now's the time to drop them in the chat. And if not, I think Audrey, Joseph, Monica might have one or two that they have to ask.
Great. So just parsing through some of the ones that people sent in the type form. I guess one was just some more of the, I guess, logistics of starting out. I guess, what does that look like? Are you looking for investors? Are you making business plans? What are the, I guess, maybe the nitty-gritty details about trying to maybe realize like a dream, like make a side hustle, a main hustle, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think for us, again, we started this while we were doing other things, right? And so at that point in time, you're not really thinking about investors, which is good, right? Because you can really focus on creating the product or the thing you want to build without any outside interference. I think we didn't start talking to investors. I mean, some people wait till they have a proof of concept. We actually went one step further beyond that. For us, we didn't talk to investors until we had proof of revenues, because again, this is cannabis. We wanted to show that Filipino gummies were a viable thing, that we could actually build demand between, amongst, yes, of course, Filipinos, but also non-Filipinos. And so we didn't do that until after we had maybe 3 months of sales. And that's when we opened up our fundraise. So a
Mm,
lot of our early bits and pieces, I mean, we bootstrapped this. So again, no outside funding until we could show that we had revenues.
great, great. Love that. Joseph, do we have maybe one or two others?
Yeah. Um, so we can pivot a little bit. But I think I saw someone named Brian Reed here. So we had a question regarding to being parents and trying
Uh-huh.
to navigate this as a well, I guess I was gonna say for you as a mom, but working it together, what does that balance look like? Trying to raise a family while also, realizing that dream.
Oh gosh. It's a wild ride. So you have to understand, Brian and I have known each other since college. And so in many ways, oh, there he is. There's his face. So in many ways, like we've grown up with each other through so many different phases, even before this, right? From college to navigating New York, um, through different jobs, through getting married, having kids, getting a dog, like, and then of course, Dear Flor. Um, it's interesting. I think part of what makes this work from a business standpoint is the fact that we have very complementary skill sets. Like the shit that he does, I am not good at all. I'll be the first person to tell you that I'm terrible at, like, you don't want me. Okay, that's not true. I mean, no, no, you don't want me building models. Like you don't, like, from a finance and operations piece, like that is his area of expertise, not mine. I deal with the product. I mean, we both deal with the product, to be fair. But things like the creative bits, the marketing, um, we both fill the printer. I also have the job of the sales role. I don't know. It just works because we just have very different skill sets. I mean, and we'd also been in class with each other. We'd worked on projects together. We always knew that we wanted to do something together, and nobody's killed each other yet. Right. So we're still here, even if yeah, I'm sure Brian's wanted to smother me in my sleep, like when I'm snoring and shit. But like, we're still here. I think when it comes to like raising kids, that part is fascinating because like we don't hide from, other parents. Some people are like, do you tell other parents, what you do? Yeah, we do. We also have been very upfront with our own children. I remember like in Brian's early days, because he'd worked in the cannabis industry longer, like for maybe 4 or 5 years before we started Dear Flor. And some kid innocuously asked our son, "Well, what do your parents do?" He's like, "Well, my mom works in an advertising agency, my dad works in cannabis." And he's like 11 at the time. The kid was like, "Oh, is your dad a dealer?" And I'm like, "Well, fuck, we need to go talk to him and explain to him what daddy does." Because it's not fair, right? It's not fair for him to get caught off sides because we haven't been transparent with him about what it is we do. So the same thing applies with Dear Flor. So because we're working together, dinner time at our house, and one of the things that we try and do every night, it's getting harder and harder with the kids' activities, but we try and have dinner every night together as a family.
Hmm.
So they hear a lot of the business take. They will ask us, "Oh, did you get that investor?" Or "How's that run coming along? Do you have a new flavor?" And sometimes I'm just like, "Well, shit, like, do I work for you?" I guess the answer is yes, I do work for my children. Um, but they, I think the biggest heartbreak for them, because we do have a standing rule in this house, especially because we do a lot of R&D, we do a lot of competitive product testing. You have to. If there is any candy in the house, you are not allowed to touch it. No,
Fair.
because we're very diligent about trying to put it away, but we are human. Like, what if we screw up? So they know that they're not allowed to touch anything at all, unless it's been given to them. And so it's always a happy day when we get the non-medicated samples for events because then they can try all the different flavors. It really sucked for them. Like, "You're making an ube candy? Can I try it?" I'm like, "No, you can't try it." "You're making a
Show
mango
me the
candy?"
ID. Show me your ID, right?
Oh, it's like, ugh. So yeah, but when they get the unmedicated ones, I'm like, "Here, you can have like a shitload, but that's it."
Right, right. Brian, great to see you here. We do have maybe one more that we can take, and I have a question here in the chat. Very tactical. When it comes time to having a conversation with a consultant or hiring someone to do branding, logo marketing, is there a list of questions? Is there homework that you advise someone does before reaching out to someone to hire?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would strongly, strongly recommend, if you're in this mentorship group and there are other people that have marketing or advertising skills, huddle with them before you talk to anyone because you're going to get raked over the coals. Because here's the thing, when you hire an agency, right, they're going to want to understand what are you ultimately trying to do? Like, what do you ultimately want to communicate? What makes your product different? What are your codes? What do you want to stand for? Some of those things you want to figure out ideally. You don't have to figure it all out, but you should have a sense of, you know, we stand for this, but not this, right? So in the case of Dear Flor, we were very clear that we stood for Filipino flavors and culture, right? And so, and that was knowing that was important because in some of the initial design concepts, you'll get things that look Hawaiian. And I'm like, we're not a Hawaiian brand. We are a Filipino brand, very distinctly. This is what we're going for. Our first round of packaging looked very different from this one. The first round had some kind of like indigenous, like textile prints, um, different treatments there. When it came to the second round, which is the version of the packaging that we had today, we were dealing with like, okay, you know, not that flower feels too Hawaiian. Those, the other part too is if you're doing anything with ube, spend a lot of time studying what ube looks like because that is a tough one. Like to put it bluntly, like if you get it wrong, it's going to look like a turd. If you get it wrong, it's going to look like not ube. It'll look like a sweet potato, right? If you get it, like you're going to get it wrong more often than you get it right, right? So those are the things you kind of want to think through before engaging a consultant because you want to make sure that their time is spent executing your vision, not trying to help you find it, right? It's one thing for them to help you refine it, but to explore, discover, you better have some money in your pocket if you're going to do that.
Great, great. I love that. I love that we had some questions that were more tactical, some that were more kind of more strategic or broader. I feel like we went through a lot of your history. I feel like I learned even the things that didn't come up in our preparatory call yesterday. So thanks so much for the time. But before we kind of work to close out, I want to give Lisa the space to say, hey, are there any key takeaways? But before we get that, I would say, what is the best way for people to connect with you and your work? Any pluggables, anything you want to mention?
Oh my God. Best way to find us. Definitely give us a follow on Instagram at Love Dear Flor. If you're into gummies, now is a great time to head to dearflor.com because everything is 20% off for AAPI Heritage Month. And if you're in the FilExcellence community, go to Shameless Plugs because we do have a discount code that works all year long. So it's there for you. Definitely, you know, if you're interested in 100 Ways to Filipino and that whole storytelling series, check out our Substack. It's dearflor.substack.com. And if you feel like it, connect with me on LinkedIn. You know, honestly, I'm pretty reachable. I answer all DMs. Again, we are a team of two, so I answer all the DMs. So if you need to find me, hit me up on Instagram.
She's pretty reachable now. Who knows? A year from now, 2 years from now, might not be as easy. So take the advantage while you've got it. And thanks for plugging the Discord as well. It's been very active. I'm glad that we made that move for this iteration of the program. So maybe I'll give you the last word too. Is there anything that you feel like we didn't cover? Is there a key takeaway? Is there something that you want folks to hear before we wrap tonight? Or do you feel like you said it all?
I don't know. I mean, I talk a lot. I would say I think important, just important thing, especially because this is a community that is in all of these different places and spaces. Embrace every opportunity that you can to just connect with your culture and your community. I don't think I need to say too much with this crew here because you're already doing it. Um, but you just, I don't know, just over the course of doing Dear Flora these past 2 years, I've met some of the most amazing people. Instagram has become almost like my office water cooler, right?
Mm, mm.
So just take every opportunity to connect and lean in.
Great, great. Lisa, thank you so much. As you know, this is the first time we've done this. I learned a lot. I took some notes. There's some quotes that you had that we're gonna we're gonna try our hardest to clip here with timestamps and everything. Loved everything you had to say. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for
Thank
the
you for
time.
having me.
Yeah, thanks for everyone that joined. We are looking to have more Kapwa hours like this. Again, if you're not inside the mentorship community, we were looking to do another cohort once this one wraps. But thank you so much for joining us. And I want to hand it back over to Audrey, maybe anyone at the FilExcellence team that wants to say anything else. Or are we good, Audrey?
We're good. Thank you so much. This is great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. You can follow us on Instagram at FilExcellence. You're probably already doing that. We're looking to have more of these. If you have any questions or want to see something, please contact us. Thank you again, everyone. Thank
It's
you so
open
much.
to you all as well. We have the link online for you. If you have an idea for a couple hours, we're so open. This is a community for you. So,
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.